Welcome to 10-Minute Type Advice by Personality Hacker. I'm Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
This show features questions from the Personality Hacker community that we answer in about 10 minutes. We've been using personality types in our coaching for years, and we'd love to answer your questions about personal growth through the lens of type. You can find out more about us at personalityhacker.com. Okay, now let's hear today's question.
Hi, Joel. Hi, Antonia. So I just had a quick question about using type theory and personality theory as a tool in your life. If I'm interacting with somebody, I guess I don't know when to stop with the theoretical knowledge and start looking at them as an actual person. Because I don't want to go through life thinking stuff like, you're an ESTJ, so I have to treat you this way, and this is what I expect from you. But I also don't want to enter into each new relationship, whether platonic or romantic, blindly. Like, I want to have some kind of expectation, but I don't want to have some solidly formed vision in my mind of how this person should be and act based on their Myers-Briggs type or their genius type or whatever you'd prefer. I'd like your advice or your wisdom on where to draw the line. Thank you.
Thanks, Tommy, for the question. Several years ago, Antonia and I recorded a podcast talking a lot about the map not being the territory in life. Alfred Korzybski has this concept that the map is not the territory. In other words, a map of New York City is not New York City. Like, a map is a representation of New York City. And if you, in fact, had a map that was an accurate representation of New York City, it would be impractical because it would have to be the same size as New York City to be accurately representative, right? If it was accurate down to the detail, and it would have to include every aspect of the city, the air quality, every rat, every fire hydrant. And so what we do, because that would be impossible to navigate New York City with a map like that, we oversimplify maps. We create symbols for them, we shrink them down in size, and we use them to approximate where we are on the territory of the world. This is how we go through our world. We have these maps that we use, and personality type is much like a map of the reality of humans we interact with. So we use this oversimplified map of how humans behave and show up, and we move through the world, and then we can have a sense of how to engage with people. Now, most people don't even have the map of personality type. They use whatever they've come up with, stereotypes or approximation of socioeconomic status or whatever they've decided to use in their life to navigate their world. And then there's some people, like probably you, Tommy, and us and other people that listen to this show, that have discovered type and use that as a map to understand other people. And then there's some people who use type as a map to project how they believe other people will be, almost overvaluing the map of type rather than starting with the person. They say, well, and this is what you alluded to in your question, well, you're an ESTJ. So, of course, you're going to show up in XYZ way. I expect this from you, and you're going to be this way in the world, and you have these challenges and these questions and these talents and skills. And really, it's the reverse of that. We're taking a map of personality and we're projecting it onto a person and saying, this oversimplified representation of this person is more about this person than the person themselves. And that is just a complete and total misuse of type, like a complete and total misuse of type, because it's overvaluing the map over the territory.
Yeah, I love this question. It's basically, how do we use type in the most appropriate way? And everything you just said, Joel, unsurprisingly, I agree with, because we talk about this stuff all the time, right? To continue on with using Korzybski's map is not the territory concept, we also have lots of different kinds of maps. Like, a map is, it's looking at territory or land through the lens of one style of subject. Like, there are maps that show you the popular sites, right? Like you've got a Hollywood map of celebrity houses, right? That's one kind of map. There are topographical maps, which are like how tall are the hills and mountains. There are maps that have street names. There are maps that have restaurants, right? Like, Yelp is basically a map that has all the restaurants and all this, attractions and that sort of thing.
Uber has a map in their app.
Right, exactly.
Navigation.
Yeah, navigational maps. So there are lots of different kinds of maps. And that's the same with humans too, like personality type. And we're also assuming that we're talking about specifically Myers-Briggs built on Jungian cognitive functions when we say personality type. But there's lots of different personality type maps too. There's the Enneagram, there's Big Five, there's StrengthsFinder, there's Colby, there's, like name a system, and that's a different map of looking at a person. And just like a topographical map you just mentioned, Joel, none of those maps are complete. A topographical map is not going to give you the restaurants. A restaurant map is not going to give you the street names. Or, it might, but it's not for navigation specifically. A navigational map is not going to necessarily tell you where the parks are, right? Or schools. And so we're looking at a person through one very specific lens when we're talking about their cognition. So with that said, right, understanding that all of these typologies are going to be maps of one way of looking at a person, right? One way of sort of oversimplifying them to be able to have an access point, including ourselves, by the way. We also, when we look at ourselves through these lenses, are grossly oversimplifying who we are and how we're showing up. But it also gives us access points. If you had a complete map of a city, like Joel just mentioned, it would be too much information. You would not be able to find a restaurant because the restaurant would be overlaid with, like every other piece of information. So maps that are perfect representations are useless. They're actually unhelpful.
Yeah, what we're saying is what's not on the map is more important than what is.
Yeah, exactly. For understanding that person through that slice. And so that's a very important thing to understand to begin with. That said, as a person with INTP preferences, and I'm a person with ENTP preferences, man, these maps are helpful. Oh my gosh, especially if you do not have an instinct or have, just sort of a gut feel for people, right? Like, I have a gut feel for people to some extent, but it always comes with a sense of uncertainty. Am I seeing what I'm seeing? Does that person like me? I'm like more invested in the relationship component, right? Because we use extroverted feeling or harmony, right, as NTPs, but we use it lower in our stack or it's in the backseat of our car model. So it's always going to come with a sense of uncertainty. So if I talk to somebody just trying to understand them based on that, I'm going to be more in my head about the relationship and having question marks about whether that person likes me than being able to just sort of study them as they are. I'm going to be overwhelmed by my own insecurities if I don't have a good map to be able to meet them halfway. And I'm going to be blind to anything they bring to the world that I don't bring because I'm not going to understand that that's even something that can be on the map, right? We all overvalue our own experience. And so even though we understand and have communicated the limitations of these maps, that doesn't mean that the maps are not wildly helpful. So the question of when do I stop using it and what's the most appropriate use of this of this particular style of map, which is cognition, it's when you do, as Joel alluded before, which is get upset with the territory when it doesn't match the map. Meaning that, during world events, lots of restaurants closed. They closed down over the last couple of years. Their hours are different. I'll go on Yelp, right, and I'll look for a restaurant, and it'll tell me it's open till 10, and I'll show up, and it closed at 9 now. But Yelp still says it's open at 10. Well, now I'm mad, right, because the map told me a different piece of information than reality gave me. And, I can argue with reality. I can bang on the windows and go, you're supposed to be open till 10. The map says 10. But it doesn't matter because the restaurant is clearly closed, and it closed at 9, and that's it. If I'm engaging and interacting with a person and I believe that they have, say, ESFJ preferences, and I go, oh, well, you're supposed to be traditional oriented. You're supposed to care more about tradition than anything else because you're an SJ type. And you're supposed to be completely invested in my needs because you're using extroverted feeling. Well, that's what the map tells me. The map tells me that that's how those functions work, harmony and memory, right? But if the person themselves is more interested in not necessarily getting my needs met, but more interested in in organizing their life or maybe entertaining me, right? They're more interested in making me laugh as opposed to making sure I have a drink in my hand because that's how their extroverted feeling or harmony shows up is being in an emotional space with another person. And that's how their manifestation of the function shows up, well, then I can't get mad at them. I can't be like, no, you're supposed to be like this. Or if their introverted sensing or memory is not tied to any sort of, traditions that I'm aware of, that they're more tracking sort of their changes over time and how things have changed. It's a different lens that they're seeing introverted sensing or memory through. And I don't understand it because I have an incomplete understanding of that function. And I get mad at them because they're not showing up the way that I want them to. That's an inappropriate use of a map. So use the map to navigate the person. When they do something that's baffling, consult the map. Go, does this make sense in the terms of the type, right? Can I understand them? Can I meet them halfway and get why they're showing up this way, as opposed to, say, being triggered or saying you're not supposed to do it that way? Can I use the map to meet them where they're at? Well, that's an appropriate use of the type, right? Or of type theory or of the map. That's an appropriate use. If I project onto them how they're supposed to be, and if they show up differently, I get upset. You're supposed to close at 10, not 9. Bang, 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 right? Now I'm edging into an inappropriate use. I'm projecting onto them an unreality because that's how I want to understand it, because that's how I learned it. So the point of type is to have access points and on-ramps to better understanding ourselves internally, not using the shallow criteria like Joel mentioned, socioeconomic level, how somebody's dressed, the kind of car they're driving, the career they chose, right? Like all these other markers that people have a tendency to use because they don't have more sophisticated tools. If I'm using these more sophisticated tools, then that means I can get beyond all those shallow things. I can understand the person more from the inside out. That is an elegant use of this map. But if I take the extroverted, my expectations of them, and I overlay it on top of their identity and who they are, well, now I've taken it too far. So as NTPs, this is a very powerful tool for us. This is very powerful. We understand how useful it is. And when a tool is really useful, we tend to start making love to it. We love the tool. We love this wonderful map. And I can appreciate why sometimes it's confusing to know when to let it go. And use the tool, use it to understand, use it to have a higher sense of certainty in your interactions and engagements with others. If you just have to use your instincts and what you know of a person and the vibe, as NTPs, we're always going to have a little insecurity about our read. But if we can use an elegant tool like these maps and the personality types, well, now we're in a place where we have higher certainty. Now we feel a little bit more comfortable in our interactions. Feel free to use it in that way. That's a very appropriate way of using the map. But don't limit the person to the map. Just understand that there are a lot of different ways you can slice and dice a human psyche. There's lots of different ways you can see this. You can see it through not just other modalities of typologies, but you can also see it as they are the sum total of their experiences as a human being, which is entirely unique to them. They are the influences in their life. They are their soul, right? What does that mean? I don't know. But every person comes with something that's very uniquely individuated. Carl Sagan says that we are a way for the universe to know itself because we are the emergent consciousness of an otherwise unconscious universe. And so we are uniquely individuated consciousness that sees the universe from a unreplicatable perspective, right? And so, well, what does that mean? Well, there's no map for that. Right? For whatever the soul means, whatever the individuated consciousness means. So as long as you hold it loosely, don't hold on to it too tight. Understand that there's going to be a lot of phenomena about a human being that goes way beyond the system, and meet the person where they're at as opposed to shoving them into the system, then you're going to be totally fine.
Thanks, Tommy, for the question. You can ask your own question about personality types or personal growth. Visit personalityhacker.com/questions. We also have programs designed to help you with your personal growth through the lens of personality types. Again, visit personalityhacker.com and find the program that's made just for you. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Thank you for listening to 10-Minute Type Advice by Personality Hacker. We'll talk with you on the next episode. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker.